Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Austin. We're gonna just kind of talk about the Iran
Uh,
war and just what's going on with that. Um, so Austin, kind of tell me tell me what your thoughts are. So how is the war going? Kind of where does everything stand, right? I know there's kind of a lot of stuff out there. We're hitting them, they're hitting us, but like, what's kind of the battle assessment? What do we know? What do we not know?
uh, so the main things that I have been tracking, which given this is not yet like a full on ground conflict, the main things I've been keeping track of are what are called sorties, or you can also call them like strikes and stuff. I think that's what the Pentagon's been calling them. So just kind of measuring how much is the U.S. keeping up its operational tempo, and then I'm also watching like how much are the Iranians launching in return, and then we're kind of keep track of what, especially right now. Like I think the focal point of the conflict is kind of reached a point where both sides are hitting like I don't really know what a good term. They're technically civilian targets, and I mean there is kind of like a technical prohibition on that, but it is kind of like economically valuable stuff. Like the Iranians are hitting ships trying to transit the Hormuz to keep oil from flowing out, but then we've got both sides hitting like oil infrastructure. We've got attacks
Is it,
on power plants and that sort of stuff.
yeah,
So
like
kind of keep it.
desalination plants, those sorts
Yeah.
of things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so the big thing that happened this weekend so far is yesterday Trump made that threat that like if they didn't open the Hormuz in like 48 hours, he would start targeting power plants, and the Iranians have responded they would, retaliate in kind. So that we're kind of getting to the point on the escalation ladder. It can't get much higher. Like the other big thing that happened this weekend was I believe it was yesterday our time. I think it was I'm not sure what time it was there local, but they supposedly it was the U.S. It could have been Israel. Nobody really knows. Somebody hit the Natanz nuclear power plant in Iran. So the
Okay.
Iranians responded by hitting Dimona, which is where the Israeli nuclear program is located. So we're kind of we're really at that point where things can get really dicey. But uh, and then two, going back to what I said earlier, like there is clear signs the U.S. strike sortie rate is starting to decline. Iran has been kind of depending upon who you ask, it's either been increasing in the last few days or it's been stable. So which does kind of go with like the U.S. sorties being down because that means we're not hitting missile bases or launchers like we were before.
Right.
So it's and then two, something like the other day when they hit the gas fields for the first time, the Iranians responded by pretty much instantly hitting targets in like Qatar, Saudi Arabia. I think they also hit UAE if I'm not mistaken in Kuwait. So we're kind of at that point where like both sides can follow through on their threats. Like if you do something, we do it back in turn. So it is kind of like a high level strategic sense. It is kind of a stalemate at this point, in my opinion, because it's the U.S. and Israel retain the capacity to inflict a lot of casualties, but the Iranians have the ability to inflict like strategic damage.
Hmm.
So it's like, yeah, you can kill all these guys at this base, but then we'll destroy this fuel facility, and then your gas prices go up by like another 20%. So I mean, we're
Right.
kind of they're fighting very asymmetrically, and it does seem like I think that's the whole reason behind like Trump's threat yesterday is just because he's trying to break that deadlock somehow.
So really kind of as I've been thinking about this, one of the things that I'm trying to get more clarity on, to be honest, I haven't been able to look at it recently. I will say, so I did go to an event with Mike Pence yesterday. It was mostly on American civics, so he didn't really talk about much, but he did kind of briefly allude to the Iran war, but nothing like really like nothing in there. So I kind of thought I was like, wow, that's kind of disappointing. I almost wondered like I don't think anybody really kind of knows like where this is going to go, right? So I
Yeah,
think everyone's like being very cautious about like, hey, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to criticize it. I'm not going to, at least the elected officials, right? And
yeah,
past elected officials. Because you would think like Mike Pence would be like kind of more Huckabee, where he's like, yeah, this is a good thing. We're all in.
yeah. Well, that is something that a lot of people have been pointing out, and like I've kind of noticed it too. Like the last, like especially in the last like 72 to 96 hours, there's been like a very they're still kind of doing the triumphalism, but you can kind of tell there's like that weird, like you kind of, I guess the lack of a better term, like that hesitancy. And I think that does kind of reflect that we've hit the point where like, yeah, I mean, you can keep hitting, but they can keep hitting too. I mean, it's clearly
Yeah.
that's, and then like there was. like I said, we're not quite clear on what their launch rates are right now, but there was a general agreement that they did increase last week after we killed Larry and Johnny. So I mean, they still have the capacity to like do a lot, and they're still doing a lot, but they definitely demonstrated like they can increase it if they need to. So I do think that's. And then the other big thing, which I just sent it to you right before we got on. So the aircraft carriers to me has been one of the more interesting things, which we kind of I know I kind of talked to you about the Lincoln situation, but
Hmm.
so supposedly what was it like a week ago, the USS Gerald Ford, which is the newest aircraft carrier in the fleet, had what they termed what was it like a laundry room fire
Yeah,
or
they said that like someone like
like
I
a lint like a lint
yeah, they
trap
were
or
saying
something.
they couldn't say if it was explicit, like if it was sabotage or like whatever it was, you know what I mean? Like on the ship, they couldn't say that. So what they were kind of, I think from what I'd heard was they were basically being like it was like a laundry issue, right?
Yeah,
Like there's a laundry fire or something like that, which makes you kind of be like,
yeah.
I
Well,
take my
I
linen out every day when change out the fucking dryer. So it's like, how did you guys not do that? You know what I mean? And so it's
yeah.
like, yeah, I don't think that's what's going on.
Well, see, I think me and you both, like, as soon as that happened, we were like, "That's really weird." And then, too, the thing I pointed out was like, "Why would you make an announcement of that? That's like relatively minor." And
Yeah.
then, what was it like 4 or 5 days later? It comes out, it's like, actually, this was a fire that like raged for like 30 hours and it like
Yep.
just destroyed like 600 bunks or something. Which
Hmm.
I don't know how many rooms that is, but that's a very extensive fire.
Yeah.
And then today it came out. They're probably going to have to take it into like dry dock for like 14 months of repairs, and it's like if this is a laundry room fire, how do you need 14 months of repairs?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and for me, it always kind of made me be like, and I think we've talked about this, where it's like, especially after the Houthi situation, where it's like I mean, I'll be completely honest, I'm getting to the point where it's like, why do we even have these things anymore?
yeah, I mean,
Like
you're
I
not the
understand,
only
like
one.
you just need a launching base. Like you don't need to send actual. I mean, I guess like I can see why we'd still have them, right? But it's
Yeah.
like in a conflict like this, or in a conflict like what we had with the Houthis, it's like you just need to be sending out drones and you need to do it cheap and you need to, just have a vessel to just send them out, And it's like you can't have, what are these? I think this carrier was like 5 billion, $10 billion. Like you can't have that out in the field anymore and not expected to take damage because they're going to take damage. They've got drones. I think the Iranians still have a lot of their anti-ship Harpoon missiles.
Oh yeah.
It's like, and I think it was like with the carriers, they're specifically staying further away than what they would because they're like, hey, if this thing takes a hit, we're like done for.
Well,
It's like you
yeah.
can't have that.
Well, too, with I kind of alluded to it a second ago with so there's, the Ford is one of the two carriers on station so far, or
Mhm.
was on station, I guess. So the other one was the Abraham Lincoln. And so me and you kind of kept track on that because what was really weird was the Iranians came out like, I think it was I want to say like last Tuesday or something like that. And they're like, yeah, we targeted it. And everybody's like, okay, whatever. And then, like, literally 30 minutes later, CBS drops this report that, like, at least one Iranian vessel got close enough to, like engage it. And,
Mhm.
like, I remember me and you talked about it, and I was like, it's really, like, bizarre like, this ship was able to get close enough to get into, like, because they said it was like a gun range fight with the destroyers,
Yeah.
which, for people who don't know, guns, like, especially on destroyers, they're limited to about 30-ish miles, 15 miles, depending on what ammunition you're using. And so, like, your missiles, like your average anti-ship missile, that's 200 to 300 miles. So if you're close enough for a gunfight, you're close enough for like a missile fight.
Well, and I
And
thought with that ship, it was like they had to get a helicopter up
yeah,
to take it out. Like, because it's like they was too close for them to use any of their traditional weapon systems on it. And I'm like,
it
what?
the report said they kept missing. So the fact
Yeah.
they had the helicopter up was very interesting. And then two, the Iranians were like, yeah, we shot at it, we drove it off, and they claimed they hit it, but so it's kind of like, okay, I mean that's interesting, but then like a couple of days later, like it came out like based off like I think it was like satellite images or stuff. They're like, yeah, the carrier did move to like Oman, and like after like a day or two, CENTCOM came out. It's like, oh yeah, they didn't hit it. They definitely didn't hit it. And it was just like, okay, that's really weird. And
Yeah,
then
but it did enough for you to be like concerned about it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Where it's like, oh shit, they could have hit it.
yeah, and so it's like, okay, this is really getting kind of weird. And then two, so for like the first time in a week, I just saw this. Sitcom finally posted like a video because they tend to do that. They'll post like I guess you call it like hype edits from like carriers or stuff when they're operating.
Hmm.
So they finally posted one from the Lincoln for the first time in like a while, and but it was at night. So it was so as soon as I saw that, I was like, "That's very interesting." The first video we get of it, and like I think it was like a week and a half, is like nighttime, so we really can't look to see what. So I was like, "Okay, like this is very interesting," and yeah, there's just a lot of other stuff on that that's like really kind of so like, and going back to the point you made about like we really just need something like drones or stuff. One of the really funny things about this is the Iranians have actually went that route.
Yep.
They've created what they call drone carriers, and they literally just take like a regular civilian like vessel and just convert it to like launch drones and stuff. And I mean, it's super cheap. And I mean, as we've seen on this, like one of the big things the Iranians have been using is their one-way attack drones. And then I don't know if me and you even talked about it. I know we've commented on it before, but like the fact the U.S. has also used these one-way attack drones, and they've been openly like, yeah, we actually copied these from the Iranians. Like,
Yeah, they like stole the concept or whatever from the Iranians, and then I think I may have saw something where it's like they're trying to get Ukrainians because they're the only ones who actually developed any capability to make
yeah,
drones. They're now getting them to make their drones, which are based off of the Iranian drones, but the Iran is literally had been supplying Russia with those drones. And I'm just like, what the fuck are we like? What are we spending our money on here at this point? You know, like we don't have any capability.
yeah, it's very interesting. It's I don't know. You mentioned that about like the drone concept too. It just kind of hits me. It's like the Iranians really have been on the leading edge on a lot of this tech, which is very interesting.
Well, and I think one thing I've heard people comment during just kind of the diplomatic stuff, especially as like they're kind of finding out more like kind of the events that were leading up to the war, is, and I think this is something that people didn't quite understand, but I think we maybe kind of talked about it a little bit during the 12-day war, or whatever it was last year, was um, they're pretty pragmatic, um, and they're pretty kind of like realistic about like what they can do and what their capabilities are. And whereas the United States is like, oh, they don't have any capabilities. We can just take out their leader and they're done and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, they're a little bit more sophisticated than of an enemy than we had anticipated. And they are pretty forward thinking. They're pretty pragmatic. They're like, hey, drones are going to be the thing, and they've been supplying them for the past 4 years in Russia. And it's just kind of like, hey, like this isn't the enemy we thought we were going to be fighting. And I don't know where the intelligence gap was on that, but everyone who did the diplomatic stuff was like, yeah, like they actually were like, here's like I forget what the diplomatic part was, but they were like, I don't know if they said no enrichment or low enrichment or something like that, but they were like willing to do that. Like they were pretty pragmatic about like what they were willing to give up, but the US was just like, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so I can't remember who the report was by. There's been a lot come out about like what was going on in the last like few days. I know what was I think like the British national. I can't remember what his official title is, but it's kind of like their version of like the National Security Advisor.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I feel like I think it's Kushner and Witkoff were just like there's really agents like they really just
Yeah,
were
yeah, I
not like.
saw that.
And then I think the Omanis have said the same thing, and then so and then there was a report came out. I can't remember who it was by yesterday, but it was like yeah, it's like it was pretty much just like Benjamin Netanyahu and like conservative talk show hosts talked him into it, and he's like nobody in the administration really was like pushing back, so that kind of matched with like the whole Joe Kent situation.
Yep.
But it's
Yeah,
like
I was just
yeah,
gonna say I did want to talk about that a little bit. What did you watch his interviews that he's kind of been having come out?
I haven't watched the one with Tucker yet. I watched the
Okay.
one with Sagar.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that one was interesting too, and there's so much there. I mean, it was just like you
Yes.
had Charlie Kirk, you had the Butler stuff, you had I think when Iran sent over like an assassin, I think that was part of the Butler plot, and like you just had a lot of this stuff, and it's like whoa, like this isn't just about the Iran war. It's like there's a lot of interesting things going on kind of behind the scenes that I feel like we're not really made aware of.
And then too on that, like I thought it's funny, but it's not really funny. But like Sagar, as soon as he resigned, was like they're going to try to prosecute him, and like
Yep.
literally it came out like within a day. It's like oh yeah, the FBI is.
Yeah.
And so it's like yeah, that definitely made them angry.
Yeah. So back to kind of the war situation. So there were really kind of I'll start off with two things. Anti-air. Does Iran have any more anti-air capabilities, or has that actually been depleted? I know they've got offensive where they can kind of attack the US, or not the US, but US assets and then Israel and the Gulf states. But do they have any anti-air, or do we actually control kind of the skies? Because I've seen kind of, I think it was Trump or Netanyahu had kind of said like, hey, we kind of run the skies now. But at the same time, you had that F-35 get shot down and for mysterious circumstances. And then you have, a lot of the other stuff kind of happening with the Gulf states. So that's why I'm just kind of like, what, like, have we depleted the anti-air capability? And is it just the offensive capability that Iran has?
In my opinion, based on everything I've seen, my assessment is definitely we haven't, and I think that's so. Like they're making a big deal with like those bombers flying out of like England.
Hmm.
So in of itself, the fact they're having to fly bombers from that far away kind of is telling. And that I don't know if everybody saw that, but like I think it was Friday night they announced that like they had launched like missiles at Diego Garcia, which is
Yep.
like 4,000 kilometers, which I
Yeah,
think
it's
is
like,
like
I mean, it's like almost directly south of India. And it's like,
yeah.
I mean, it's way out there.
So if you kind of do the math on that, that means basically like all U.S. bases out to like almost the channel, in the English channel, or under like have the possibility if they really want to go for it, they could launch missiles at it.
Yeah.
So the fact they're launching bomber missions from England to me was kind of like a sign of that in of itself. But the big thing with that too, there's people taking photos of these planes as they go off and come back, and they're still carrying what are called JASSMs, which are like these air launched cruise missiles, basically.
Hmm.
And those are like what they call standoff weapons. That means you really can't get close to the target, but you can kind of get close enough to launch these missiles from like I think their range is like 150 miles or something like that. I don't hold me to that, but so it's still can't get close enough to targets to launch because its their defenses are still too threatening. But you can kind of launch these long range weapons.
Yeah.
And then two, besides the F-35, which I'll get to that in a second, um, they're still destroying drones. They're still, and then like today they released footage of them like shooting at I think it was like an F-15, and then they claimed they got close to getting an F-16 from the Israelis the other day, which the Israelis did acknowledge they got fired at. So
Hmm.
it's still clear that they're still able to contest it. I do think it is degraded, but I mean it's like you said with like the F-35 thing. So originally it was claimed they damaged it, and then the thing that like me and other people noticed was like right after that happened, there was what they call combat search and rescue operating
Yep.
off like Saudi Arabia. And so that was kind of a telltale, like, okay, something happened there. And then it came out like the next day. I think NPR was the one that reported it. Was like, it was actually a crash landing. The plane's not expected in service, back in service soon, which is kind of like, Pentagon speak for, yeah, this is basically so damaged, it's a write off.
Yep.
So, I mean, if they can get an F-35, they can still get, like, an F-15 and F-16. Those aren't stealth aircraft, and especially like if you put like a B-52 close enough to something, I mean, that's, a big old bomber, that's easy target.
Well, and that was kind of the next question was with the air defense was that, and I know we've talked about it where the more sophisticated missiles and stuff like that we're running low on.
Mm,
But it made me kind of think, okay, like, well, what about like kind of the dumb bombs, right? So the smart bombs are running low. What are our capabilities? Like, what capabilities do we still have on the dumb bombs? We should have supposedly enough of those. And
yeah,
so it kind of made me think, okay, well, I don't remember seeing too many B-52s rolling over Iran and just taking out targets and stuff like that. So it made me kind of think, okay, like, if we're not doing that, then we still have anti-air
yeah,
against us.
exactly.
And I mean, you could always say, okay, well, we'll do a B2, right? Or, we'll do something like that. But, usually your B-52 is coming in once you've kind of degraded all that and
Yeah,
you can just drop bombs at will. And I haven't seen any of that. And so that's why I was like, well, usually that's kind of an indicator. Okay, like if they started doing that, then I would say, okay, I'm not as worried about the offensive capability of Iran because you could slowly start kind of degrading that with a lot of these dumber bombs. But it's like, well, since they still have anti-air defenses and you can't do that, it makes me think, okay, like the threat level isn't down far enough like
yeah,
the US is saying it is.
yeah. That's exactly like, um, yeah. It's kind of like we've got plenty of dumb bombs, but the fact they're still using like I said, like those JASSMs, those air launch cruise missiles and stuff. a very good indicator they think the threat's still there, or
Yeah.
and then two, I guess the F-35 kind of proves it. But like, if they could get enough air superiority, they could just start dropping the dumb bombs. Like that wouldn't be an issue. But the issue now is, like you said, like we don't have a lot of those cruise missiles or those air launch systems. They're very expensive, and I don't even think we procured any this year, if I remember correctly, from the
Dude, it was like 20 if we did. I mean,
yeah.
it's
It's
like barely double digits.
there was another report. I know. I think I sent one to you before that was like about like the first like 4 days, but now I think it was CSIS came out with like a new report. And it's like, yeah, like the first 10 days they launched like I think it was like 22% of our tomahawks, like not
Hmm.
like the entire national stockpile, and that was
Yep.
in the first like 10 days. And then I think like THAAD, which we talked about. I know we talked about that before with like the 12-day war. Like I think on that one we used somewhere between it was like 25% of like what's ever been ordered, but like that included like backlog orders, so it's possibly as much as like I think up to like 50% of the
Hmm.
the what we currently had. Well, then the most recent reports is like, oh yeah, they've used like another 32% of THAADs, so it's like we've basically used like almost the entire stockpile of like THAAD at this point. And
Yeah.
then I know I sent it to you. They're pulling systems out of like Korea and like
Yep.
Okinawa and stuff. So it's like we're really depleting through a lot of this gear.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna do a short here that I just did. I'm going to release it sometime soon after that we get this out. And it was just talking about like, hey, like as we're taking resources from the East Asia and moving it to the Middle East, you're just creating gaps, so that if China or North Korea or Russia did want to do something in South Korea or Taiwan or Japan, you're kind of leaving it open to them. And if we get bogged down in the Middle East, I mean, you're leaving a whole probably more strategic part of the world just open for, open to be taken and
Oh
open to
yeah,
be, I was gonna say utilized, but to be taken over and converted.
yeah. I mean, there's even like stuff now because like we're prioritizing Israel's defense so much. Like the Gulf states are getting really upset with us because they're like, guys, we're getting pummeled and you're doing nothing. Like you're
Yeah,
supposed to like we gave you all this money. We're like aligned with you, and like you're giving us nothing in return. So I mean,
yeah,
and there's definitely been a lot of reporting in that and like South Korean media and stuff. Like they're definitely taking
yep.
some hard lessons from this.
Did you see, I think BB was like, he went to one of the sites today and was saying like, this is why like Europe and all their allies and all these other countries should get involved in the war
Yeah.
because Iran is just targeting civilians. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, what the fuck? Like targeting civilians. And I think I sent that to you. And I was like, what? I was like, bro, I mean, I'm not super against it like some other people are with the school that they took out the first day, and I think that was a mistargeting or an improper targeting. But it's like you're about to take out their freaking nuclear facilities and their power plants and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, you're complaining about how Europe and these other countries need to get on board because they're targeting civilians. And it's like, bro, like we're doing that too. You know what I mean? It's like I don't like it just boggles my mind how like we're willing to just kind of be like, yeah, well, rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was like the one of the funniest examples of that was like the Israelis keep complaining about the cluster warheads the Iranians are using,
Yep.
and they're trying to file like a UN complaint. And it was really I can't remember if it was like a I want to say it may have been like an Iranian official or something because they've been using like Twitter, which is really funny in of itself. But they were like, "You're not even a signatory to that treaty, and like you use cluster munitions in Gaza. Like you have no room to be complaining about this."
Yep.
So it is very. And then I think it was Dan Shapiro, who was the former U.S. ambassador to Israel. I saw him complaining about like I think it was that day the Israelis hit that one Iranian gas field, so the Iranians turned around and hit like several back in return. And he was like, "Oh, this is illegal. Like these attacks are illegal." And it was like somebody said, "It's like, dude, you guys literally you started it. Like you hit
Yeah.
their like you can't complain when and like kind of what I said to begin with. Like we really are in a situation where it's like, yeah, we're hitting them, but they still have the capacity to turn around and hit us back. And like that with like you brought the desalination plants. Like that was another example of that. They hit that one. I want to say it wasn't on one of the islands. I think it was on like the Iranian mainland. So the Iranians turned around and hit one in the UAE. So it's like they can really, do that. And then like somebody like a lot of this stuff too is just like really self defeating in like a funny way because like I know Iran gets like 2% of their water from desalination, but Israel gets like I want to say it's like 20 to 30%.
Yep, that sounds about
So it's
right.
like you really don't want to get started on that. And then the whole like, I mentioned before like the threat Trump made about like targeting like the power plants. Like the largest Iran's system is like really decentralized because they kind of expected something like this for so long.
Hmm.
So like their largest power plant only supplies like 2% of their national grid.
Yeah,
Israel's largest power plant supplies like 20%.
yeah,
Just that one facility. So it's like, again, I really don't think you guys are thinking these. If you want to escalate it there, they're going to escalate it there, and that's not really something you can win.
yeah. So I want to make one comment. I think I circulated this on Twitter, or I sent it. I didn't circulate it, but I reposted it, and I think I sent it to you. So I want to say this before we get into my next set of questions. It was like John Bolton was coming out saying, I can't support this war anymore. And I'm like, when John Bolton is
Yeah,
telling you that, hey, I can't support this war, and he's like, there's just no preparation, no planning. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, when John Bolton is coming out and telling you that this war is fucked from the beginning, like at the beginning of the stage, it's like, man, you really have lost like support within your own group. I was like, when John Bolton does that, like that's bad. So I did want to talk about, I think I'd kind of been sending you a little bit about this. So De Gaulle,
yeah.
the French carrier, what's kind of your expectations with that? It looks like it's kind of almost to the point where it's east of Cyprus. Do you think they're going to come into the fight?
They're probably going to do like defensive stuff. I think going back to what we talked about, like the U.S. carriers, like the Ford is definitely needing repairs. Like that seems like they can't run it much longer. So I kind of think what they're going to use with the De Gaulle is just use it for the same stuff they've been using the Ford for, which was like,
Like
you
a
know,
pre-positioned anti-missile for
yeah, pretty
Europe?
much like anti drone that kind of stuff. And if something happens with the Houthis, they could probably run it into the Red Sea. Uh, I think it's the Washington, if I'm not mistaken, is also another carrier we're supposedly going to send over there soon. I guess it will probably replace the Lincoln or something. But it just kind of goes back to what we said. Like they're really burning through these assets. Like even if they're not getting damaged, like it's just like they're running them so ragged they got to have replacements at this point.
Yeah. The the thing with that, and I don't put it against Macron to get involved. I think he is someone who is more he would be he would be happier if the French started kind of going more towards French Empire, kind of like what they were doing. And I think in the text, and I mostly point towards the text where I think if you remember they were leaked between him and Macron or Macron and Trump, and he was like flattering them and he's like, we have been able to do so much with some of these threats. I look forward to being able to kind of do it with you in the future. And so it kind of made me like that kind of made me be like, okay, like if France could get involved, I think they're gonna wait till their hand is forced. But it was one of those where it's like I think them and Britain to an extent, but definitely France seems to be more willing to jump into the fight if given the opportunity. It's just about what like on what terms does it need to happen for that to happen, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, there was something really funny. I think it was like the Germans are like, yeah, we're not getting involved, and then the French are kind of like the Europeans really don't seem to know what they want to do. Which by the way, Estonia said they're getting involved. So yeah, here comes the Estonian Navy with like one like tugboat.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it seems like the Europeans don't really want to know what they're like a unified policy on it. And then I don't know if you saw this, but it was really funny. Like I think it was like the German foreign minister was like, yeah, like you were like you guys were like threatening like Greenland like a year ago, and now you want or not a year ago, like a few months ago, and you want us to get involved. So then like the Iranians came out and they're like, hey, if you guys want us to defend Greenland, just let us know. We'll send guys out. So it's like, I mean, the Iranians are really good at trolling. I do have to say they've done a phenomenal job on that front. But yeah, I think as far as like the French, like one thing that Macron has said that's like really funny, I thought was like when they talk, they're still talking about trying to organize convoys to like the Hormuz or something. Like I think the original offer was like, yeah, we'll like organize it after the war ends, and it's like everybody's like, okay, dude, what's the point of even doing that? Like the war's
Yeah.
over. Like, what's the point of that?
Well,
Juncture.
and that's the thing is like the Gulf states, which I still don't understand. Is like I mean, I don't even want to say like this has always kind of been my issue with them, right? Is they're willing to take from the US, right? They're willing to get resources, get support, be aided, get all that stuff from the US. And then they go in and they tell, MBS goes in and tells Trump, like, hey, I think you should do this. And then once the bombs start flying, they're like, whoa, whoa, like we
Yeah,
don't want to get involved in this. And it's like, okay, like what do you think was gonna happen? Like and I it's kind of the same thing with Israel, where it's like, they're more willing to get into the fight, but it's like these Gulf states, it's like, they're like, we support you going against Iran, but like we don't want to bear any of the burden. And
yeah.
I'm like, bro, you're like right there. You're bearing all the burden.
Well, what makes it even funnier too is like they have bases that the U.S. is using right now to attack her in.
Hmm.
I mean, like legally speaking, that makes you a party to the conflict. That makes you what's called a belligerent. Like that is a defined legal status.
Yep.
And like somebody made a really good point was like after the 12-day war last year, I can't remember if it was like a UAE official or maybe like a Saudi official was like, "Yeah, this is great. Like we get to stay in neutral where they fight each other." And it's like somebody said, it's like this time it didn't work out for you. You don't get to play it this time.
Yeah.
They really thought they could play that neutral ground and avoid it, and it's like, no, man. Like this is like the Iranians warn you, the U.S. warn you. Like if this goes, it goes.
Yeah. So last thing is more kind of where we currently stand. We got less than 5 minutes. So um what does the deal look like if we stop here?
So it came out, I think it may have been it was Axios actually. Was like, yeah, the U.S. demands are still basically the same as they were before the war. They want the Iranians to quit funding their proxies. They want them to scrape their missiles and pretty much their entire nuclear program. And I mean, that was a non-starter before the war. I think it's still a non-starter now. And then the Iranians, it was reported they talked to, I think it was El Mayadeen, which is like this big Arab publication, was like they want reparations. They want the U.S. to pull out of all its bases. I can't remember all of them, but it was like kind of like, yeah, basically just get the fuck out of here. So it's kind of like I don't think either side's really at a point like a deal is possible. And the Iranians have been very upfront about like, hey, this is the second time you guys have attacked us during negotiations. So it's like we don't really trust you to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to take a while before at least one of them is exhausted enough to like agree to like some sort of deal.
Yeah.
So I think we're in for this for at least several more weeks to possibly a few months. Like it's been reported the Iranians are prepared for like I think they want they're willing to go like another 6 to 9 months, and I know CENTCOM's prepared for like September. So
Yeah.
we're looking at like I think this war is definitely going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, and I think probably close to the deal that would happen is the ballistic missiles will go off, right? I think that's something that the US will have to concede on. But I think they could maybe get something on nuclear. I think they could potentially stop funding the proxies just because it's like they're going to be so obliterated. I mean, they'll say it, right? And you may see some IRGC stuff kind of like still happening. So I don't necessarily say I fully trust that it would happen, but I could see something like that, kind of like getting them to tangentially kind of agree to it. And then shit, I mean, there may could be another phase three of this where it's like we come back in 2 years or a year because it's like, hey, you guys are doing this shit with the proxies again. I could see the U.S. being asked to lift sanctions, and they're kind of already doing that. I know you and I've talked about that. We kind of
That
want
was
to already lift the sanctions on them, just so we can get some of this oil out. But it's like I could see that happening. And then I can, I don't think we could do anything on democratic reforms or anything like that. I just think it's too embedded. You may get some like tangential or like token stuff, but I think honestly to me I'm like that's the deal on the table, right? Is it's who's going to take it and when, right?
mm,
And where is that gonna like what situation is someone going to be in? You know, um, I don't think regime change is going to happen, right?
yeah,
I think if anything, the lesson that's going to come out of this is that you can't just regime change your way out of this conflict, and especially with someone embedded like Iran is.
yeah, and like too on the regime change front, I think one of the bigger lessons from this too is before we've always targeted like smaller nations like Libya,
Hmm.
Venezuela. Iran is a nation of like almost 100 million people, and like I
Yep.
didn't even know this till the other day. They are tied with Germany in terms of like iron capacity, or not iron capacity, like steel capacity.
Yep.
So I mean, this is a very large, decently powerful, mid-tier power. So I mean, that's a pretty good sign. Like, hey, there are limits to like this.
Yep. And that's what I don't understand is it's like, and maybe something I would add on to the deal before we end is, there could maybe be something with Israel, maybe like a non-aggression or, some sort of like um, you know, on the face, kind of like, hey, we'll do this. We're not going to strike Israel. I mean, Iran really hasn't ever attacked Israel, right? It's always kind of been Israel attacked them, and Iran through their proxies. But I could see something like that kind of happening, like coming out. Because I think at the end of the day, and that's why I say, like, I think they're very pragmatic, right? I think if we were like, hey, we want to open this country up and, get some of that steel capacity, get some of the natural resources out of there and start kind of building up a relationship, I think they would be more than happy to do it. It's just like, on what terms are we going to get to that, right? And
Yeah,
then how are you going to handle the hardliners while you're in there? And I've yet to see any sort of plan that would deal with that.
yeah,
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and end it here. Thanks, Austin, for hopping on. We'll get this out and we'll come on again and hopefully, hopefully when we come back again, it's not going to be because there's thousands of Marines dead on the beaches of Iran.
yeah,
So, we'll be on the lookout for that. And I know you and I will be talking about it, especially with Trump's message coming out that they've got 48 hours. So, we'll talk about next steps.
All right, sounds good.
Sweet. I'll see you.
See you.